The scrubland was a skillet, and Lila May was scorching on it. Her feet were gone, or so it felt. She looked down and saw only cracked, bloody things, shapes that used to be feet, now caked in alkali dust and pierced by thorns. She had lost her shoes 3 days ago, maybe 4. Time had become a simple, brutal rhythm. Sun up, walk, sun down, hide. She walked barefoot. To stop was to die, or worse, to be caught. Her dress, a mockery of civilization, was a thing of torn silk, a gaudy blue ruined by dirt and her own blood. It hung from her in strips, offering no protection from the wind that felt like a razor, or the sun that felt like a brand. Her hands were just as ruined as her feet. She had clawed her way out of a ravine, dug in a dry creek bed for water she never found, and pushed through thickets of catclaw that tore at her palms. The blisters had broken, filled with grit, and broken again. She was running from Denison. She was running from a man named Silas, who ran the Pearl and who owned the sheriff, the judge, and every girl who worked the line. She was running from the memory of her husband's polite smile as he'd handed her over to settle a poker debt. And she was running from the sheriff who now hunted her for theft. She had taken every dollar from Silas's lockbox before she'd fled. She was not sorry for the theft. She was only sorry she hadn't taken more. The sky, which had been a flat, unforgiving white for days, began to turn a sickly yellow. A wall was building in the west. It was not a cloud. It was the earth itself, rising up in a churning, brown-red mass. A dust storm. She had nowhere to go, no rock to hide under. The wind hit her first, a physical blow that stole her breath. Then the sand came. It was immediate, a suffocating blanket of grit. It filled her eyes, her nose, her mouth. She tasted the plains, and they tasted of iron and endings. She fell, tried to crawl, and then curled into a ball, covering her head with her torn, useless hands. The world went dark, roaring in her ears. She stopped fighting. This was it. This was the end. And she was almost grateful. Boone Carrigan was checking his north fence line when the storm hit. He'd seen it coming and had turned his horse, Flint, toward home. But the wind was faster than any horse. He'd spent the worst of it hunkered in the lee of a rocky outcrop, his hat pulled low, his neckerchief over his mouth. The storm lasted hours. A howling, abrasive nightmare that scoured the land. When the air finally cleared enough to see 30 yards, he rode on. The wind had been at his fence. He found the damage near the canyon rim. A top rail was snapped clean, and a post was leaning. He dismounted, his movements economical, his hand never straying far from the rifle in his saddle scabbard. He was studying the break when Flint shied, snorting and pulling back on the reins. Boone tensed. He scanned the rocks for a rattlesnake, his eyes moving methodically. Then he saw it. It was a pile of rags, or perhaps a dead animal, pushed up against the broken fence post, half buried in a drift of new-blown sand. He drew the pistol from his hip, the metal cool and heavy in his palm, and approached slowly. He nudged the shape with the toe of his boot. It was soft. He crouched, brushing the dirt away. It was a woman. Her hair was a filthy mat, her face caked in a mask of dried mud and blood. Her feet were unrecognizable. He looked around, his gaze sweeping the horizon in all directions. There was nothing. No tracks the storm had not erased. No rider, no wagon. Just this broken thing, deposited by the wind. Boone hesitated. His ranch was his sanctuary, his fortress against a world that had tried to hang him, cage him, and forget him. He had come to this high, lonely place to be left alone. Visitors were not welcome. Visitors brought trouble, questions, and the law. This woman, half dead, was the worst kind of trouble. He should leave her. The coyotes would have her by morning. It was the land's way. He looked at her hands, raw and bleeding. He had seen hands like that before, on men broken in the prison yard at Yuma, men who had tried to claw their way to freedom. He cursed, low and soft. He was no stranger to lying for survival. He was no stranger to desperation. He holstered his pistol. With a grunt, he slid his arms beneath her. She weighed nothing, a bird with broken wings. He lifted her, draped her over the front of his saddle, and swung up behind her. He held her steady with one arm, his body absorbing the jolt as he turned Flint toward the cabin, his eyes sweeping the terrain one last time. Lila woke slowly, pulled from the darkness by a sharp, stinging smell. Pine and whiskey. Her first thought was that she was dead. Her second, that she was not. She was on a cot, covered by a heavy wool blanket that scratched her chin. She was wearing a man's flannel shirt, so large it covered her to her knees. Her skin stung in a dozen places. She sat up too fast. The room spun, and a wave of nausea rose in her throat. She gripped the edge of the cot. The room was small. One room. The walls were rough-hewn logs, the gaps chinked with mud and straw. A stone fireplace dominated the far wall, a low fire crackling inside. Above it, resting on wooden pegs, was a long rifle. The floor was packed earth, swept clean. A table, 2 chairs, a dry sink. That was all. It was the most Spartan place she had ever seen. She looked down. Her hands were clean. Someone had washed them and smeared them with a pungent, green-colored salve. Her feet were wrapped in clean rags, and they throbbed with a dull, deep ache. A shadow in the corner moved. Lila scrambled backward, pulling the blanket with her until her back hit the cold log wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs as if trying to escape. A man unfolded himself from a chair. He was huge. He was not just tall, he was broad, built like the rocks outside. He filled the small cabin, making it seem even smaller. He wore dark trousers and a wool shirt that stretched across his shoulders. His hair was black, longer than was common, tied back at the nape of his neck. His face was hard, weathered by sun and wind, with a stillness that terrified her more than any rage. "You are safe," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like rocks shifting. "Where am I?" she whispered, her throat raw. "My ranch." He did not move closer. "The dust storm almost killed you. You were by my fence line. Who are you?" "Boone Carrigan," she swallowed. He watched her, his eyes dark and unreadable. She felt like a rabbit stared down by a wolf. She pulled the blanket tighter. He moved then, not toward her, but to the fireplace. He picked up a tin dipper from a wooden bucket, filled it, and held it out. She flinched. She stared at his hand. It was large, the knuckles scarred, the skin dark. She did not take it. He seemed to understand. He placed the dipper on the floor, halfway between them, and stepped back into the shadows by the hearth. Lila waited, her breath shallow. Then, slowly, she leaned forward, snatched the dipper, and retreated to the wall. She drank, the water so cold it hurt her teeth. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. "I have to go," she said, the words coming out in a rush. My husband, he will be looking for me. He will be worried." Boone Carrigan just watched her. The silence stretched. The lie felt stupid, thin. She changed it. "I am a widow," she said, the new lie feeling sharper, more believable. "I was traveling to Wyoming, to my brother's homestead. We were attacked. Indians, or bandits. They took everything." He still said nothing. He did not believe her. She could see it in the flat, hard line of his mouth. He did not believe her, but he did not call her a liar. He just stood there, a mountain of a man, judging her. Boone knew a lie when he heard one. He had told enough of them to build a new life on. He did not know what she was running from, but it was not bandits. It was something with a badge, or a brand. He recognized the desperation. It was a flavor he knew well. "There is another storm coming," he said, his voice flat. "A snow. You will not survive an hour out there, not with those feet." "I cannot stay," she insisted. Her eyes darted to the door, to the heavy wooden bar leaning against the frame. "I do not run a charity, ma'am." His voice was cold, but not unkind. "You eat my food. You use my fire. You work." Lila looked at her bandaged, useless hands. "Work. I can cook. I can sew." He gave a single, sharp nod. "The name?" She hesitated. The name she had used at the Pearl was not hers. The name her husband had given her felt like filth in her mouth. Lila May? Rest, he said. You are no good to me, broken. He pulled a heavy sheepskin coat from a peg, slid his arms into it, and picked up a length of rope. He walked out of the cabin, shutting the solid wood door behind him. She heard the sound of an axe splitting wood, steady and relentless. Lila May waited until she was sure he was gone, until the sound of the axe was the only sound besides the wind. Then she put her face in her hands and wept without a sound. The days that followed were a cold, quiet misery. The ranch was a prison of endless, empty space. The isolation terrified her. The cabin was a small, fragile box in a vast, indifferent wilderness. Their dynamic was tense, built on silences. Boone Carrigan said little. He was a man who seemed to have no need for words. He would grunt, "Wood," and nod toward the dwindling pile. Or, "Water," and hand her the heavy wooden yoke, which bruised her shoulders as she carried the sloshing buckets from the well. She tried. God, how she tried! But she was useless. The skills she had, playing the piano, speaking passable French, knowing which fork to use, were worthless here. She burned the cornbread. She sewed a crooked seam in his shirt, and he had to rip it out. Her hands, soft from a life of privilege followed by a life of shame, bled and blistered from the harsh soap, the rough tools, the biting cold. He was always watching her. She would be scrubbing a pot, and she would feel his eyes on her back. It was not the hungry, leering gaze of the men at the Pearl. It was a different kind of watching. It was an assessment, the way a man might watch a half-broken horse, waiting to see if it would bolt or bite. He was a terrifying figure. He was huge, his body weathered and hard as the land itself. When he moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that seemed to mask a deep, coiled fire. She sensed a stillness in him that was not peace, but restraint. She found herself cataloging him, just as he seemed to be cataloging her. She saw the long, white scar that ran from his left temple into his hairline. She saw the way his hand always rested near the heavy knife sheathed at his belt. She saw the rifle, always loaded, always leaning within his reach. His solitude was a palpable thing, a wall he had built around himself, and she was trapped inside it with him. He saw her too. He saw the way she flinched if he moved too quickly. He saw the dark, fading bruises on her neck and arms, shapes that looked terribly like fingers. He saw her haunted eyes, which darted to the windows and the door every time the wind rose, and he saw her hands, trembling so badly some mornings she could not lift the coffee pot. The landscape was as cruel as the man. The promised snow had arrived, a fine dry powder that hissed against the glass. Frost claimed the corners of the windows and never left. At night, the wolves howled. It was not a distant sound. It was close, a hungry chorus that made her spine turn to ice. "How far?" she asked him one evening. The stew she had made was thin, but he ate it without complaint. Her voice sounded small and strange in the heavy quiet. He looked up from his bowl, his expression unreadable. "The nearest town," she clarified. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. 2 days' ride," he said. "If the weather holds, and you have a horse." 2 days. 2 days by horse. She had no horse. She had no strength. She was trapped. A week into her stay, the incident happened. Boone had gone to the barn to feed the stock. She was supposed to be boiling water, but the cabin felt small, suffocating. She stepped outside, pulling his oversized coat around her. He was in the small corral, trying to get a rope on a spooky bay mare. The wind was high, and the horse was dancing, rolling its eyes, showing the whites. "Stay back," he ordered, not looking at her. "I can help," she said, moving toward the gate, desperate to prove she was not just a burden. "You do not know horses." "I do," she lied. She had ridden side saddle in a park in St. Louis. It felt like a lifetime ago. She unlatched the gate and stepped inside, holding out a hand. "Easy, girl, easy." The mare saw her, saw the flapping coat, and pulled back, snapping the rope from Boone's grasp. The horse wheeled, ears pinned, and bolted directly for the open gate. Lila froze. She was in the center of the opening. She did not even see Boone move. 1 second he was by the feed trough. The next, he was on her. He did not push her. He tackled her. He wrapped one arm around her waist and used his body to drive them both backward, out of the horse's path and into a drift of snow. He landed hard, with her pin beneath him. The air was driven from her lungs in a painful rush. The mare thundered past, kicking up clods of snow and mud, and disappeared toward the canyon rim. For a moment, there was only silence. Lila was pressed into the snow, the entire shocking weight of him on top of her. His breath was hot on her cheek. She could feel the solid, powerful muscles of his chest and legs. Then, as if from a great distance, she heard a sound. It was a terrible, strangled sob. She realized it was coming from her. The panic that had been simmering for weeks exploded. She began to cry, not quiet, polite tears, but deep, racking sobs that tore at her throat. She was not crying about the horse. She was crying for her lost life, for the brothel, for the feel of Silas's hands, for the cold, and for the sheer, terrifying fact that she was alive. She clung to him, her hands fisted in the front of his shirt, and she buried her face against his chest, sobbing like a child. Boone was frozen. He had expected her to fight, to scream, to hit him. He had not expected this. He had not expected her to cling to him. He was not a man built for comfort. He was a man built for violence. Her small, shaking body beneath him, her tears soaking through his shirt, sent a jolt of something through him that was equal parts confusion and a deep, unfamiliar ache. He stayed perfectly still, his body shielding hers from the wind, and let her cry. When the sobs finally quieted into ragged gasps, he pushed himself up onto his elbows, taking his weight off her. "The horse is gone," she whispered, her voice thick. "She will be back when she is hungry," he said gruffly. He stood, pulling her to her feet as if she weighed nothing. She stumbled, her legs weak. He put a hand on her elbow to steady her. She flinched, pulling away from his touch. That night, Lila dreamed. She dreamed of hands, her husband's hands, signing the paper, Silas's hands, bruising her arms, and Boone's hands, big and scarred, pulling her from the snow. She woke up in the dark, her own voice choking on a scream. She was ashamed, horrified by the spark of warmth she had felt when he'd held her. Boone heard her. He had been sitting by the fire, cleaning his rifle, unable to settle. He heard the muffled cry from her cot. He stood, walked to the thin curtain that separated her sleeping area from the rest of the cabin. He stopped, his hand on the fabric. He could hear her trying to smother her cries into the pillow. He listened for a long time, his jaw tight. He did not go in. He did not offer comfort. He just stood guard. Eventually, he turned, pulled his own blanket from his bunk, and sat in the chair by the cabin door, his rifle across his knees. He sat there until the first gray light of dawn touched the snow. The next morning, neither of them spoke of it. She rose, her eyes puffy, and started the coffee. He went out to find his horse. Shame was a poor motivator, but it was a powerful one. After the night of the runaway horse, after clinging to him and sobbing like a broken child, Lila May woke with a hard, cold resolve. She was a burden. He saw her as a weak, useless thing, and she would rather be dead than be useless. She began to work. She rose before he did, her feet now healing into tender, scarred pads, finding the cold dirt floor in the pre-dawn dark. She fumbled with the kindling and flint, her bandaged hands clumsy, but she had the fire going and the coffee pot set near the flames by the time he emerged from the shadows. He stopped, watched her for a moment, and gave a single, curt nod. It was more an acknowledgement than a thank you, but it felt like a coin in her empty pocket. She did not stop. She boiled the water for washing, the steam scalding her face. She took one of his ruined shirts, a thing of heavy flannel, and set about mending it. The needle was a foreign, hostile tool in her grip. Her first stitches were crooked, wide, and weak. She pricked her finger, and a drop of blood stained the gray cloth. She stared at it, her vision blurring with tears of frustration. She ripped the stitches out and began again, and again, until the seam was tight, if not beautiful. He gave her a sack of potatoes and a knife. She sat on the small stool, peeling and chopping. The knife was heavy, and her wrist ached. She cut herself, a small, deep slice into her palm. She hissed, sucking the blood, looking quickly to see if he had noticed. He was at the far end of the cabin, cleaning his rifle, his back to her. She wrapped a rag around the cut, pressed her lips together until they were white, and kept chopping. Her hands, which had once been her vanity, were becoming things she no longer recognized. They were red, raw, and peeling from the harsh lye soap. The blisters from her journey had turned to calluses, which then split open in the dry, cold air. Every night, she smeared them with the green salve he had given her, but by morning, the pain was back. She did not stop. Boone watched it all in silence. He saw the new blisters, the way she winced when she lifted the heavy iron skillet, the blood on the rag. He had seen men quit for less. He had seen men break. She was not breaking. She was hardening. He had brought her in as a piece of broken, wind-blown trash. He was beginning to see something else. He saw grit. It was the only currency he respected. The world outside shrank. The cold, which had been sharp, became a solid, heavy thing. The sky turned to a sheet of lead, and then it opened. It was not a gentle snow. It was a horizontal, screaming whiteout. The wind, which had been a constant moan, rose to a shrieking, violent howl that seemed to come from inside the cabin itself. It found every crack in the chinking, sending knives of ice-cold air across the floor. Boone came in from the barn, his shoulders and hat caked in white, his face rimmed with ice. He dropped a massive load of firewood by the hearth, the sound shaking the floor. "How long?" Lila asked, her voice barely a whisper. She was staring at the window, which was no longer a window, just a square of agitated white. "Days," he said, pulling off his heavy gloves. "Maybe a week. It is a blizzard." Lila's hands went to her throat. A week. The first day was tolerable. She cooked, she mended, she paced. The second day, the world was gone. There was no sky, no land, only the roaring, oppressive white. The cabin, which had felt like a small trap, now felt like a coffin. Lila panicked. It was not a sudden thing, but a slow, rising tide. The air grew thick, heavy, unbreathable. The walls seemed to be moving, inching closer with every howl of the wind. This was the same feeling, the same as the small, locked room at the Pearl, with the patterned wallpaper she had stared at for hours, the smell of stale perfume and whiskey, the sound of the key turning in the lock. She could not sit. She stood, paced the few steps from the fireplace to the door, turned, and paced back. Her breathing was shallow. Boone watched her. He had seen this before. He called it cage madness. He had seen it in cougars trapped and in men in Yuma. He gave her distance. He kept to his side of the room, sharpening his knife, oiling his saddle tack, his movements slow and deliberate. He was a rock in the middle of her churning panic. He said nothing, but he was aware of her every move. At night, he did not sleep. He lay on his bunk, listening to her ragged breathing from behind the curtain, waiting for the sound of a scream or the sound of the door bar being lifted. He checked on her. He would rise quietly and stand by the curtain, just listening. The sound of her shifting, her small, frightened gasps, was the only thing that proved the storm had not swallowed them whole. On the fourth night, she broke. She had been trying to help him, hauling a bucket of snow to melt for water. She set it by the hearth, and her vision tunneled. The roaring in her ears was suddenly louder than the wind. She swayed, put a hand out to the stone fireplace to steady herself, and missed. Lila collapsed in the kitchen, a quiet, boneless fall. The tin dipper she was holding clattered loudly on the packed earth floor. Boone was on his feet before the dipper had stopped rolling. He crossed the room in 2 strides. She was a pale, crumpled heap by the wood box. "Lila," he said, his voice sharp. He nudged her shoulder with his boot. She did not stir. He cursed, low and fluid. He bent down, his fear and frustration a hot knot in his gut. He had a dead woman on his hands. He scooped her up. She was lighter than he had expected, a bundle of sticks and rags, her head lolled back, and her dark hair, unpinned, fell across his arm. He carried her to the cot. He laid her down, his movements rough, efficient. He brushed the hair from her face. Her skin was cold, her lips blue. He grabbed his flask of whiskey from the shelf, uncorked it with his teeth, and rubbed a small amount on her lips, then on her wrists. Her eyelids fluttered. She gasped, a thin, rattling intake of air. Her eyes, wide and dark, tried to focus on him. They were filled with a primal terror. "Easy," he grunted, setting the flask down. "You just fell." She clutched the front of his shirt, her grip surprisingly strong. "The walls," she whispered, her voice rasping. They are moving." "It is the storm. You are fine." He tried to pull away, but her hands were tangled in his shirt. "No," she begged, and the sound broke him. Just a little. It was not a demand. It was a plea from a place so broken he could not help but recognize it. Do not leave me in here. Please, do not leave." She was not seeing him. She was seeing the men from her past, the locks on the doors. He did not know what to do. He was a man of action, of fists and rifles. He did not know how to be gentle. He did not want to be. Touching her felt like a danger, like holding a flame to dry tinder. He pulled his hand from her grip. "I am not leaving," he said. His voice was harsher than he intended. She watched him, her eyes still wild, as he stood and walked away. He did not go to his own bunk. He went to the fireplace, took the heavy bearskin rug from the wall, and dropped it on the floor, just outside her curtained-off space. He sat, his back against the wall, and picked up his rifle, laying it across his lap. "I am here," he said to the darkness. "Go to sleep." Lila lay on her cot, shaking. She could not see him, but she could hear the sound of his breathing, the occasional shift of his weight on the floor. He was a wall between her and the storm. He did not touch her, but he was there. She fell asleep, for the first time in days, to the sound of a man guarding her door. The storm broke 2 days later. The world was reborn, scoured clean, silent, and blindingly white. The emotional distance between them had cracked, like ice on a river. The silence was no longer heavy and tense. It was shared. Boone knew, with a sinking feeling, that he could not just let her peel potatoes until she was strong enough to leave. If she was to survive out here, with him or without, she was a child who needed to be taught. He started the next day. He took her to the barn. The spooky bay mare, who had returned for oats as he predicted, was in her stall. "You will learn to ride," he said. It was not a question. "I know how to ride," she said, her pride stiffening her spine. "You know how to sit on a park horse. You do not know how to ride." He threw a saddle on the mare. He did not offer her a hand. He watched her struggle, her skirts tangled, until she managed to haul herself up. The horse danced. Lila grabbed the saddle horn with both hands. "Let go," he said. "I will fall." "Let go of the horn. Feel the horse with your legs. She moves. You move. Stop fighting her." He was a harsh teacher. He made her ride for hours, until her legs and back screamed. When she fell, he simply waited for her to get back on. Then came the shooting. He handed her his rifle. She staggered under the weight. "It is too heavy," she complained. "The world is heavy." He said, "Lift it." He showed her how to brace it against her shoulder. "Tuck it in. Tuck it tight, or it will break your collarbone. I will not fix it if it does." She fired. The explosion was deafening, the kick a brutal, violent blow. It sent her stumbling back. She dropped the rifle in the snow, her shoulder on fire, and burst into tears. He did not comfort her. He waited. Tears do not stop a man. "Lila, pick it up. Do it again." She did. She fired until her shoulder was a mass of purple bruises, until her ears rang, until she could hit the tin can he had set on the fence post 3 times out of 10. He taught her how to cook, not the thin, watery stews she had been making. He taught her how to make biscuits with lard and bacon grease, food that would stick to your ribs. He showed her how to skin a rabbit he had snared, how to handle the bloody, slick entrails. She gagged, but she did it. They were working by the fire one night, the smell of gun oil and coffee filling the cabin. The silence had been comfortable. "That scar," she said, her voice small. She was oiling his saddle, her hands moving with a new, practiced confidence. "The one on your head, how did you get it?" Boone stopped what he was doing. He was sharpening his knife, the rhythmic shing, shing, shing of steel on stone, the only sound. He set the stone down. "You should not ask questions you do not want the answer to," he said. "I want the answer." He looked at her. He saw not just a broken woman, but the one who had fired his rifle until her shoulder bled, the one who had skinned the rabbit. He owed her something. He owed her the truth. "I killed a man," he said. Lila's hand stopped moving. "It was in a saloon, in Texas, a brawl over cards. He said something about my mother." His hands clenched into fists. "He was white. I am not." He looked into the fire. "My father was a white man, a trapper. My mother was Comanche. He was a big man in town, until people found out about her. They did not like it." He tapped his own cheek. "They do not like the blood. To the white men, I am a savage. To the Comanche, I am a half-breed, a ghost. I belong nowhere." He told her about the brawl, the flash of the knife, the man falling. He told her about the trial, which was short, and the sentence, which was long. 2 years, he whispered, and his voice was raw. "Yuma, you have not been in a cage until you have been in Yuma." He touched the scar. "A guard gave me this, a farewell present." He looked at her, his eyes dark. "I came west to vanish. I came here so I would not have to kill another man, or be killed." Lala put down the saddle oil. She stared at him, this huge, dangerous man, and for the first time, she was not afraid of him. She understood his solitude. It was not a choice. It was a scar. She took a deep breath. It was a trade, his truth for hers. "My husband," she said, her voice shaking, but clear. "He is not dead." Boone looked up, his expression guarded. He was a gambler, a good one. Until he was not, he lost everything. Our house, our money. And then, he lost me. "He sold you," Boone said. It was not a question. She nodded, the tears she had refused to shed over the rifle now burning in her eyes. "To a brothel, to a man named Silas, to pay a gambling debt." She told him about the locked room, the men, the shame. She told him about the night she had planned her escape. "He caught me," she whispered, her hands knotting in her lap. "A man, not Silas, one of his customers. He caught me by the stairs. He was drunk. He tore my dress." Her voice went flat, cold and dead. "There was a whiskey bottle on the table. I broke it. I broke it on his head, and when he fell, I used the broken glass." Boone said nothing. He just watched her face, pale and hard in the firelight. "I took the money from the safe, and I ran, and the sheriff is hunting me for theft, but he is also hunting me for him." She looked up, her eyes meeting his. There was no fear in them, only a cold, hard truth. "I am not sorry," she said. The confessions hung in the air, 2 bloody, wounded things. They had seen the darkest parts of each other. The next night, the cold snapped. Lila was shivering, an uncontrollable, bone-deep shake. The confessions had left her raw, exposed. Boone watched her from across the fire. He stood, walked to his bunk, and pulled off the heavy wool blanket. He walked to her cot and stood over her. "Move over," he grunted. She stared at him, her eyes wide. "Move over. You are freezing. You are no good to me sick." She hesitated, then shifted to the wall. He did not get under her blanket. He sat on the edge of the cot, his back to her, and then draped his own heavy blanket over both of them. He was a furnace. His back was a solid wall of heat. He did not touch her. save for his hip pressed against her hip and his shoulder near her head. They sat in silence for a long time. She was pressed against this man, a killer, a half-breed, an outcast, and she was not afraid. The shivering stopped. "I feel safe," she whispered to his back. He tensed, as if she had struck him. He said nothing, but he did not move. He sat there, a guardian, until her breathing deepened, and she finally fell asleep, surrounded by his warmth. The kiss happened 2 nights later. The tension was back, but it was a different thing. It was not fear. It was a wire, pulled humming and tight, between 2 points. She was by the fire, brushing her hair, which she had washed with his harsh soap. It was clean, but it crackled with static. He was watching her. He had not been able to stop watching her. She finished, her hand dropping the brush. Their eyes met. He did not know he was going to move until he was doing it. He crossed the space between them. She did not flinch, did not move away. She just watched him, her lips parted, her breathing shallow. He stopped in front of her. He raised a hand, his fingers scarred and rough, and touched her hair, as if to see if it was real. Then he bent his head and kissed her. It was slow at first, hesitant, a question. It was the taste of coffee and loneliness and the cold. Her lips were soft, tentative. Then she made a small sound in her throat, and her hand came up to fist in his shirt, the same way she had in the snow. The dam broke. All the weeks of watching, of fear, of solitude, of shared confessions, it all poured into it. His other hand went to the back of her head, tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. It was not a gentle kiss. It was rough. It was desperate. It was a starving man taking food. It was a drowning man taking air. He kissed her like he was trying to erase a memory or create a new one. He pushed her back, and she stumbled, hitting the log wall. But she did not break the kiss. She kissed him back with the same desperation, a raw, aching need that matched his own. He was losing himself. He could feel the fire under his restraint, the thing he had kept chained for so long, breaking free. He broke away, pulling back as if he had been burned. He was panting, his eyes wild. He stared at her, her lips swollen, her eyes dark, and he was filled with a sudden, violent shame. He was an animal. He had taken her, sullied her, this broken thing. He had proven he was no better than the men in Yuma. He turned, putting a hand on the fireplace mantel to steady himself, his back to her. I am sorry, he rasped. Lila's heart was hammering. She could taste him. She could feel the burn of his stubble on her skin. She had felt fear. She had felt shame. She had felt cold. This was the first thing she had felt in a year that was hot. That was alive. She saw his shame. She saw him retreating back into his cage, and it made her angry. She took a step, reached out, and put her hand on the solid, tense wall of his back. He flinched, but did not turn. She moved closer, pressing her hand flat against his chest, over his pounding heart. "I do not want gentle," she whispered. Boone froze. Her words hit him harder than the rifle butt. He looked down at her small, pale hand against his dark shirt. He could feel the tremble in it. Or maybe it was him trembling. This was not a weak, fragile thing. This was a woman who had killed a man and was not sorry. This was a woman who was his equal in her brokenness, in her desperation. He could not breathe. He could not think. He grabbed his coat from the peg, his movements jerky, violent. He ripped the door open, ignoring the bar. The blast of Arctic air was a slap in the face, but he welcomed it. He stalked out into the snow, into the moonlight, leaving her alone by the fire. He was shaken, not by what he had done, but by what she had asked for. He did not return to the cabin for hours. When he did, he was frozen, a layer of frost on his shoulders and in his hair. She was on her cot, pretending to be asleep. She listened to him strip off his frozen coat, his movements stiff. He added a log to the fire. The cabin was filled with the sound of the wind, the hiss of the log, and the heavy, unspoken thing between them. He sat in the chair, not on his own bunk. Lila lay in the dark, her heart a cold, hard knot. The warmth she had felt, the anger, it had all frozen. He had rejected her. He had seen the ugly, desperate thing she was offering, and he had chosen the storm over her. She was, and always would be, alone. The cold from her cot seemed to rise from the very earth, seeping into her bones. She was shaking again, but it was not just the chill. It was the deep, rattling tremor of utter desolation. She could not bear it. Slowly, so quietly she barely made a sound. She rose from her cot. She took her thin blanket with her. He watched her, a shadow in his chair, his face unreadable in the dim, red light from the embers. She did not look at him. She walked past him, her bare feet silent on the packed earth floor. She went to his bunk. It was larger than her cot, built into the wall, and his scent was on the blankets. Coffee and smoke and something wild. She laid her thin blanket on top of his, and she crawled in. She did not get under his covers. She lay on top, curled in a tight, miserable ball, her back to the room. She waited for him to yell at her, to tell her to get out, to throw her back on her own cot. He did not move. He just sat. And after an hour, or maybe 2, she heard him stand. She heard the scrape of the chair. He walked, not to her, but to his own chair, and retrieved his blanket. He came to the bunk. Lila held her breath. He did not get in. He simply unfolded his heavy wool blanket and laid it over her. It was a crushing weight, heavy and warm. Then he went back to his chair. They did not speak of it. The next night, she did the same. She went to his bunk. This time, he did not wait. He stood, laid his blanket over her, and went back to his chair. On the third night, she crawled under his covers, into the bed he had built, into the space that smelled of him. She lay on the very edge, her heart hammering. She heard him stand. He walked to the bunk. He stood over her for a long moment. She could feel his presence, a heat and a weight in the air. He did not add his blanket. He took off his boots, and he got in behind her. He was a furnace. He lay on his back, on top of the covers, a solid wall of heat. He did not touch her, but she could feel his warmth soaking into her, driving the cold from her marrow. They lay like that, 2 separate, breathing creatures in the dark, and slept. It became the new silence. They did not speak of it. She would bank the fire, he would bar the door, and they would go to his bunk. They slept with a foot of space between them, a canyon of unspoken tension, but they shared the same air, the same warmth. The silence was broken by small, almost accidental, touches. He came in from the barn, his hands caked in mud and ice. She was washing vegetables for the stew, her own hands red and raw in the cold water. She had nowhere to dry them. He took the rough towel from her, and before she could protest, he was drying her hands. He was rough, efficient, his grip firm, but then his thumb, calloused as a boot heel, brushed the dirt from a cut on her knuckles. It was a simple, practical motion, but it sent a jolt up her arm that made her snatch her hand back. He just looked at her, his face impassive, and went to wash his own hands. Another time, she was mending his shirt by the fire, her head bent. The lamp oil was low. She squinted, her hair falling into her face. He was cleaning his rifle, the parts laid out on an oiled cloth. He watched her push the stray hairs back with her wrist, her hands too dirty to touch her face. He grunted, a sound of impatience. He set down his rifle part, walked over, and tucked the hair behind her ear. His fingers, smelling of gun oil and steel, brushed her temple, her cheek. They were not gentle. They were certain. Lila froze, her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the rough pads of his fingertips on her skin. He did not pull away. His hand lingered, his thumb resting for a bare second on her cheekbone. She looked up. He was staring at her, his dark eyes fixed on her, and the fire he always kept banked was visible, a hot, dangerous glow. The physical tension in the cabin grew until it was a living thing. It was in the way he handed her the axe, his fingers brushing hers, It was in the way she turned her back to him, too aware of him watching her. The small space was charged, electric, waiting for a spark. The snows began to melt. The world, which had been a muffled, white prison, began to drip. The sound of melting ice was constant. They could go outside again. He took her back to the corral. The bay mare was restless. "You ride like a sack of grain," he said, his voice clipped. "You ride with no balance. Out here, balance is all there is." He was teaching her to ride bareback. "You feel the horse," he said, "not the leather." He was on the mare, his body moving with the animals, a perfect, fluid motion. He slid back on the horse's rump. "Get up," he commanded. "There is no room. Get up." Lila gritted her teeth. She put her hands on the mare's back, her foot on Boone's boot. He did not help her. She had to scramble, hiking her skirts up, and throw her leg over. She landed, not in front of him, but on him. She was straddling his lap, her front pressed into his solid chest, her legs on either side of his. The horse, sensing the shift in weight, took a nervous step sideways. Lila gasped, grabbing his shoulders. I cannot." "Slide forward," he growled, his voice a low vibration she felt in her chest. But she could not. She was frozen. She was acutely aware of every part of him, the solid muscle of his thighs beneath her, the hard wall of his chest, the way his arms were bracketed around her. She could feel his breath, hot on her temple. She was surrounded by him. She was supposed to move, to slide forward onto the horse's withers. But she did not. She sat there, on his lap, on the horse, in the muddy corral. She was breathing. He was breathing. The horse was breathing. It was the only sound. She did not move away. She tilted her head, and her cheek brushed the rough wool of his shirt. A shudder went through him, a deep, primal tremor. His voice was a rasp, tight with a fury she did not understand. "Get down." He did not wait for her to move. His hands, hard as iron, clamped onto her waist. He did not help her dismount. He lifted her. He lifted her clear off the horse. His arms corded with the effort, and her body was light, a plaything in his grip. He set her on the ground, hard. Her boots sank into the mud, but he did not let go. His hands stayed on her waist, his grip bruising. He was breathing hard, his nostrils flared. He was glaring down at her, a strange, agonized look on his face. His thumbs dug into her hip bones. She stared up at him, her lips parted, her own breath coming in shallow gasps. She had pushed him. She had crossed a line, and he had not pushed her away. He held her there for a second, 2 seconds, an eternity. She could feel the tremble in his hands, or maybe it was her own body. Trembling, he let her go, pushing her back a step as if she were on fire. "The lesson is over," he snapped. He swung off the horse in one fluid, angry motion and stalked toward the barn, not looking back. Lila stood in the mud, her hands at her sides, her waist burning where his hands had been. That night, the cabin was a tinderbox. They ate their stew in a thick, vibrating silence. Every scrape of a spoon on the tin plate sounded like a scream. She could feel him watching her. Though he never looked up from his bowl, she could not stand it. She threw her spoon down. It clattered, a sharp, metallic sound. "Why are you angry?" she demanded. He did not look up. "I am not angry." "You are," she insisted, her voice rising. "You have been angry since the corral. You will not speak to me. You will not look at me." He set his own spoon down, very slowly, very deliberately. "This was a mistake." His words were cold, a dousing of ice water. "What was?" she whispered. "This," he said, his voice flat. He gestured red to the cabin, to her, to the bunk. "You, letting you stay, it was a mistake." The blood drained from her face. This was it. He was throwing her out. "So I am a mistake? A stray dog you are tired of feeding?" He stood up then, his chair scraping loudly. He was a dark, towering shadow against the fire. "You are a woman. I am a man. This place, it is not made for that." "What is not made for it?" she shot back, her own anger rising, a defense against the sudden, cold fear. A man and a woman? Or you, Boone? Are you not made for it? He took a step toward her, his face a hard, dark mask. You do not know me, Lila. You do not know what I am. I know what you told me. I know you are a man who has been in a cage. And I am still in it, he roared, his voice so sudden and so loud it shook the very dust from the rafters. I am not the man you think I am. I am not some gentle hero from one of your books. I am not a man for love. I am not a man for this. I never asked for gentle, she cried, her voice cracking. I never asked for love. You do not know what you are asking for, he shouted, advancing on her. I know I am not afraid of you. You should be. He was an inch from her, close enough for her to feel the heat and rage coming off him. I am a killer. I am a half-breed savage. I am an animal. I am not good. You are just scared, she whispered, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a sudden, sharp, and terrible clarity. You are not a killer. You are not an animal. You are just a coward. The word hung in the air. It was a physical thing, an arrow she had shot. His face changed. The hot anger vanished, replaced by something cold, dead, and infinitely more dangerous. He did not hit her. He turned, and with a guttural roar, he slammed his fist into the log wall, just inches from her head. The sound was a dull, sickening thud. It was the sound of bone hitting wood. Lila did not flinch. She did not even blink. A small chip of dried mud from the chinking fell onto her shoulder. He rested his forehead against the wall, his hand still pressed flat against the wood. He was breathing like a man who had been run down. The cabin was dark. The fire had burned down to a bed of glowing red embers, painting the room in a bloody light. He was still at the wall, a dark shape of defeat. His knuckles were split. She could see the dark line of blood trickling down his hand. She approached him from behind. She did not make a sound. She stopped, her body almost touching his. She could feel the tension in his back, the rigid set of his shoulders. She reached out, not to his back, but to the hand he had smashed against the wall. Her small, scarred hand covered his. He flinched, a deep shudder racking his body, but he did not pull away. His blood was wet and warm on her skin. You are right, she whispered, her voice so low he barely heard it. Her words were for his back, for the darkness. I am broken. I am ruined. I am not a fine lady from St. Louis. I am damaged. She stepped closer, pressing her chest to his back, her arms sliding around his waist, her hands linking over his stomach. She held him from behind, her small strength against his great, trembling one. I am tired of being scared, she said, her voice thick. And I am tired of you being a coward. He was as rigid as a stone. If I am going to break, she said, her lips brushing the rough wool of his shirt. If I am going to fall to pieces in this God-forsaken place, I do not want it to be the memory of Silas that does it. I do not want it to be the wind or the cold. She tightened her grip, her nails digging in slightly. If I break, she repeated, her voice a steel wire. You better be the one that broke me. It was as if she had pulled a trigger. He turned, his movement a violent, sudden thing that tore her grip apart. He faced her. His eyes were black pits in the red-lit darkness. He was not looking at her with anger. He was looking at her like she was the first and last thing he would ever see. He kissed her like he was starving. His mouth was not a question. It was a claim. It was hard and desperate and bruising. He gave no quarter. He tasted of blood and whiskey and a loneliness so deep it matched her own. He backed her up against the wall. His mouth, His mouth was hard, hungry, and he gave no quarter. He kissed her like he's starving, and she is the only thing that can save him. He backed her up, 1 step, 2 steps, until her back hit the rough logs of the wall. His hands were in her hair, tilting her head back, tangling in the strands. Her hands were on his chest, fisting his shirt, pulling him closer. If such a thing were possible. He lifted her, His hands were under her thighs, and she wrapped her legs around his waist without a thought, her boots knocking against his legs. He carried her, his mouth never leaving hers, and crossed the small room to his bunk. He fell with her, not on her, but beside her, rolling, pulling her on top of him. The small bunk creaked, its wooden legs groaning in protest. It was a flurry of torn fabric and fumbling. Desperate hands. He was not gentle. He was not slow. He was pulling at the laces of her dress, and she was ripping at the buttons of his shirt. His hands were everywhere, on her back, her legs, her hair. They were rough, calloused, and they burned her skin, leaving trails of fire. This was not love. This was something harder, more primal. It was survival. It was a pact. When he was finally inside her, a sharp, sudden, tearing, wonderful pain. She gasped. Her eyes flew open. It was a pain that was real. It cut through the years of numbness, the shame, the cold. She moaned, her voice small, a protest, a plea, a word. You are too big." It was half a tease, a flicker of the woman she used to be, and half a truth that overwhelmed her, a truth that was splitting her in two. He stopped, his body rigid above her, his face inches from hers. His eyes were clear, focused, not lost in passion, but terribly, terribly present. "Then hold on tighter," he growled. And she did. She dug her nails into his back, locking her ankles behind him. She was an anchor, and he was the storm. It was not gentle, it was a blizzard. It was the dust storm that had nearly killed her. It was the fight for every breath. It was the clash of two broken, lonely, desperate people, finding the only salvation they could in the flesh and bone of the other. It was the only truth in a world of lies. When it ended hard. A final, shuddering crash. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. Then, a small, choked sound. Lila was sobbing. Her face was pressed into the hollow of his shoulder, her body shaking with quiet, heartbroken sobs. She was not crying from pain or from pleasure. She was crying because, for the first time, she had not been taken. She had chosen. Boone was frozen. He had done it. He had broken her. The evidence was in her tears, in the small flecks of blood on the blanket. He was a savage. He was an animal. He was about to pull away, to get up, to put the wall back between them, when she whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. Do not go." So he stayed. He lay there, in the dark, his body slick with sweat, his knuckles throbbing. Her small, sobbing body was clinging to his, and after a long, long time, his hand, the one he had smashed against the wall, came up, gently, as if she were made of spun glass, as if she were a newborn foal. He touched her hair. He just stroked her hair, over and over, until the sobs quieted, and her breathing deepened into the first real, safe sleep she had had in years. Lila woke first. The cabin was gray with the first, cold light of dawn. She was alone in the bunk. Panic, cold and familiar, flashed through her. He was gone. He had left. Then she saw him. He was sitting in the chair by the cold fireplace, watching her. He was fully dressed, his hat on his knee. He had not slept. The awkwardness was a physical thing, a cold, heavy blanket in the air. She pulled the rough wool blanket up to her chin, her face burning. Her body ached in places she did not know existed. She had ruined it. She had offered herself, and he had taken her. And now he looked at her with that same flat, hard expression. He looked at her, she thought, like one of the girls at the Pearl. She started, her voice a dry croak. He stood, cutting her off. "I will feed the stock." He put on his hat, grabbed his coat, and left. The door shut behind him with a quiet, terrible finality. Lila lay there, unmoving, for a long time. Then she dressed, her hands shaking so badly she could barely do the buttons. She felt used, not by him, by herself. She made breakfast. She had to. The routine was the only thing that would keep her from shattering. She made coffee. She fried the last of the bacon. She made biscuits. her hands moving with a life of their own. He came back in, the cold of the morning clinging to him. He did not look at her. He washed his hands in the basin, the splash of water loud in the quiet. They sat at the small table. He ate. He did not speak. She could not bear it. She watched him, this huge, silent man, and she wondered if he would tell her to leave, if he would pack her a bag and point her toward a town she could not reach. He finished, pushed his plate back. He looked at her. His eyes were not cold. They were lost. "Are you going to run now?" he asked, his voice low. She looked at him, completely bewildered. "Run? Where would I do not understand. Now that," he gestured to the bunk, to the space between them, "now that you have what you wanted, or now that I am what I am, are you going to run?" Lila stared at him. He thought she was going to run. A small, strange sound bubbled up in her throat. It was not a laugh. It was a dry, bitter, hopeless sound. "Run," she said, her voice thick. "Mr. Kerrigan, where would I run? Back to Silas? Back to my husband? Back to the men who hunt me?" She leaned forward, her scarred hands flat on the table, the anger from last night returning, but different now. It was not hot, it was cold and clear. "I cannot run," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She met his eyes and held his gaze. "You ruined me for anyone else." He just looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face, trying to parse her words. "You," she clarified, her face burning, but she would not look away. "You are the first man who did not take. You are the first man who waited. You waited until I asked." The words landed between them, heavy and true. That night, there was no question. The sun went down. She did not go to her cot. She went to his bunk. He joined her. This time, it was different. It was slow. It was almost sad. He touched her like he was learning a new language. His rough, calloused hands traced the fading bruises on her neck, the new calluses on her palms, the line of her jaw. He kissed her shoulder, her throat, her eyelids. She wept again, but this time, it was not from pain or release. It was from a terrible, aching tenderness. When it was over, they lay in the dark, their bodies tangled, the small cabin silent around them. "Thank you," she whispered. He tensed beside her. He did not ask why. He did not ask if she was thanking him for his gentleness, or for his roughness, or for simply staying in the dark with her. He just held her, his hand over her heart, and for the first time in his life, Boone Kerrigan did not feel alone. The world began to drip, after months of silence, of the dead, muffled white. The sound of melting was a constant, restless noise. Water ran in rivulets from the roof, carved small canyons in the packed snow, and turned the corral into a thick, sucking soup of mud. Spring was not a gentle arrival. It was a threat, a breaking up of the world they had known. And it made Boone Kerrigan restless. The ice had locked them in. The thaw was forcing them out. They were low on everything: flour, salt, coffee, and cartridges. He had put off the trip for weeks, unwilling to leave her, unwilling to face the world he had abandoned. But the thaw decided for him. The pass to town, a 2-day ride, would be a river of mud. But it was now possible. He told her at breakfast, "I am riding in for supplies." Lila's hand stilled over the coffee pot. The cabin, which had been a shared fortress, suddenly felt empty. "When?" "Now. I will be back in 4 days, maybe 5, if the creek is high." Their new life, the one lived in the bunk, in the shared silences, was fragile. His leaving felt like a test. He packed his saddlebags with jerky, his rifle in the scabbard, his pistol at his hip. He looked at her, his face hard, but his eyes were not. "Bar the door, at night and in the day. Do not open it, for anyone." "You are the only one who comes here," she said. "Bar it anyway." He pulled on his heavy gloves, his movements deliberate. He stood by the door, a mountain of a man, and the small space was full of his impending absence. He did not kiss her goodbye. He did not touch her. He just nodded. Once. His jaw tight. "Keep the fire low." She watched from the window as he rode out, his back straight, Flint picking a careful path through the mud. She felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, a fear that had nothing to do with the snow and everything to do with the tracks he was leaving behind. The town of Two Forks was not a town. It was a mistake, a collection of half a dozen false front buildings clinging to a muddy street, populated by men who had run out of luck or options. Boone hated it. He hated the smell of people, the stale beer, the loud voices. He was a man made for silence, and the town was a clatter of noise. He kept his head down, his hat pulled low. He rode in, tied Flint outside the general store, and felt the eyes on him. The half-breed from the high plains, the killer, the hermit. He let the names they whispered slide off him. He bought his supplies from a clerk who avoided his gaze. 50 pounds of flour, coffee, a slab of salt pork, 2 bricks of sulfur matches, and 4 boxes of cartridges. He paid in cash, his movements economical, wanting only to be gone. As the clerk was tying off the flour sack, Boone walked to the front of the store. There was a board by the door, nailed to the wall, holding notices, a lost horse, a land auction, and wanted posters. He scanned them out of habit, a holdover from his prison days. You always checked the board. You always knew who was running. He saw a poster for a horse thief, a bank robber from Cheyenne, and then he saw her. The drawing was poor, a cheap artist's rendering of a face, but the eyes were right. The name was what hit him. Lillian Hayes. The poster was fresh, the paper still white, the ink dark. Wanted. $100 reward. For the arrest and return of Lillian Hayes. For the crimes of theft and murder, last seen in Denison, Texas. Murder. She had told him she had killed a man, but seeing it in print, on a poster, made it a different, harder truth. It was not a confession in the dark. It was a fact that carried a price, $100, enough to make a man risk a ride to his ranch, enough to make a neighbor turn. He felt a cold, slow rage build from his boots. It was the same rage he had felt in that saloon in Texas, the red-all-over rage that had cost him 2 years of his life. He did not just look at the poster. He reached up, his hand steady, and ripped it from the wall, the nails screeching. He tore another one down, and a third. The clerk looked up, his eyes wide. "Here now, Mr. Kerrigan, that is official." Boone turned. He did not say a word. He just looked at the clerk. The man's voice dried up. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing, and suddenly found a deep, abiding interest in a pickle barrel. Boone walked outside. The 3 posters crumpled in his fist. He went to his saddlebag, pulled out his tinderbox, and walked to the trough. He struck a spark, lit the corner of the paper, and dropped the small, growing flame into the mud. He watched until the face, and the name Lillian Hayes, and the word murder were nothing but black, wet ash. He tied his supplies to the pack mule he had led. He did not go to the saloon for a drink. He did not rest. He swung up on Flint and rode out of Two Forks, pushing the horse harder than he should, the word murder echoing with every hoofbeat. He rode back fast. He did not tell her. Lila barred the door, just as he had said. The first day of his absence was quiet, lonely. The second day, she felt the isolation as a terror. The silence was not peaceful. It was listening. On the third day, a man rode up to the cabin. Lila was in the barn, forking hay to the milk cow. When she heard the horse, it was not Boone. The hoofbeats were wrong, lighter, less sure on the rocky soil. She dropped the pitchfork and shrank back into the shadows of the barn, her heart leaping into her throat. She peeked through a crack in the rough-hewn boards. He was not a rancher. He wore a dark coat, a city coat, and a bowler hat. He looked slick and mean and out of place. He sat on his horse, a nervous-looking gray, and studied the cabin. He saw the smoke from the chimney. He dismounted, tied his horse, and walked to the cabin door. He knocked. Lila held her breath. She was trapped in the barn. He knocked again. Harder. "Hello? Anyone home?" His voice was thin, with a reedy quality that grated on her nerves. He tried the door, found it barred. He grunted in frustration. He walked around the cabin, peering in the windows, his hands cupped to the glass. He had not seen the barn. He was about to get back on his horse, and Lila was about to faint with relief when the milk cow let out a low, mournful moo. The man froze. He turned, his eyes finding the barn. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. He hitched his trousers and walked toward her. Lila looked around, frantic. The pitchfork. Her rifle was in the cabin. The pitchfork was all she had. She grabbed it, her hands so slick with sweat she could barely hold the smooth wood. The barn door scraped open. A shaft of bright, muddy sunlight silhouetted him. "Well now," he said, his eyes adjusting to the dark. He saw her, backed into the stall, holding the pitchfork like a spear. His smile widened. "That ain't no way to greet a visitor, little lady." "Get out," Lila said, her voice a low, trembling thing. "I'm just looking for a friend," he said, taking a step inside. He was a small man, but he moved with a weasel's confidence. "Seen a woman, 'bout your height, dark hair, real pretty, but looks like she's been dragged through hell." He took another step. "You know who I'm talking about, don't you? Lillian." Her blood went cold. "Silas, he misses you," the man said, his voice dropping to a conversational, oily tone. "He is real, disappointed. You took his money. You broke his customer. He wants you back. He sent me to find you." "I do not know who you are talking about," Lila said, her knuckles white on the pitchfork. "Sure you do." He was close now. "Come on, now. We can do this easy. You come with me. Silas will. Well, he will be Silas. But if I have to drag you back, he will be a whole lot worse. My husband is here." Lila lied, the words tearing out of her. The man laughed, a short, barking sound. "Husband? Oh, Lillian, you do not have a husband? You have a poker debt." "He is checking the fence line," she said, her voice rising, gaining a hysterical strength. "He will be back any minute. He is a big man, a very big man. And he owns this ranch. He owns it, and me. And he will kill you if he finds you here." The man paused. He looked at the cabin, at the cut wood, at the large, heavy axe leaning against the chopping block. He looked at the size of the stalls, built for larger horses than his. "Husband, eh?" he said, his confidence wavering, just a fraction. "What is his name?" "Kerrigan," Lila said, the name a weapon. "Boone Kerrigan. This is his ranch, and he will be back. Now." The name meant nothing to him, but the conviction in her voice did. He looked at the pitchfork, at the wild, murderous look in her eyes. This was not the broken girl from the brothel. This was something else. "Caro Kerrigan," the man said, tasting the name. "Well, maybe I will come back and pay Mr. Kerrigan my respects when he is home." He backed out of the barn, his hands raised in a mockery of peace. You tell him Abe Ryder stopped by, just passing through." He untied his horse, his eyes never leaving the dark doorway of the barn. He swung up, his movements quick and nervous. "You have a good day." "Lillian," he called. He spurred his horse and rode away, fast, slipping in the mud. Lila stood in the barn for a full hour, the pitchfork in her hand, shaking so hard she thought her teeth would crack. Then she ran to the cabin, barred the door, and was sick in the bucket. He would be back. Abe Ryder. He knew her. He knew where she was. He would go back, and he would tell Silas, and they would come back. Not one man, many. They would come for her, and they would find Boone. They would hurt him. They would see his dark skin, his hard eyes, and they would call him a savage. They would ask what he was doing with a white woman, a wanted woman. They would kill him, all because of her. She had to run. She could not just leave him to face them. She had to vanish. So when they came, she was gone. She scribbled a note, her hands still shaking, her mind a numb buzz of terror. She took a piece of brown wrapping paper and a stub of charcoal. "Boone, I'm sorry." He came, a man from Denison. He knows I am here. They will come back. I cannot bring this to you. You were kind. She could not write it. She could not write goodbye. She threw the charcoal down. She crumpled the paper, her nails digging into the wad, and threw it in the corner. She looked at the door. She would not leave him a note. She would not leave him anything but more silence. She grabbed the small pistol he had given her, the one she practiced with, and tucked it into her skirt. She grabbed a loaf of cornbread, stuffed it in her pocket, and unbarred the door. She would just walk. She would walk until she died. It was better than him dying for her. She was on the porch, her hand on the rough log, when she saw him, a rider, coming fast from the east. It was Boone. He was a day early. He was riding flint into the ground. He saw her on the porch, and his face was a dark, thunderous mask. He did not slow down, reining flint in at the last second, the horse spraying mud. He swung down before the horse had even stopped. He saw her, her face white with terror. The barred door, now open. The fact that she was wearing her coat. "Where were you going?" he growled, his voice a low, dangerous thing. "Boone," she started. He brushed past her, into the cabin. He saw the bucket, still unemptied. He saw the quiet, terrible panic in the room. And he saw, in the corner, the crumpled piece of paper. He walked over and picked it up. "No," she whispered, following him in. "Do not." He smoothed it out, his big scarred hands careful. He read the few, frantic lines. "I'm sorry." He came. He turned, his face a thing of stone, but his eyes were burning. "Who came?" She broke. The terror, the lie, the confrontation, and the sheer, overwhelming relief of seeing him. It all shattered her. She collapsed on the floor, her back against the wall, and told him everything. Abe Ryder, the threats, Silas, the lie about him being her husband. "They will come back," she sobbed, her face in her hands. "They will come back, and they will kill you. I have to go. You have to let me go. I am poison. Boone, I am trouble. I am ruining you." He stood over her, listening. He did not comfort her. He just let her empty herself of the fear. When she was done, gasping for air, he crouched in front of her. "He is not the only one looking for you," he said, his voice quiet. He told her about the town, the posters, the name, Lillian Hayes, the charge, murder, the reward, $100. Lila stopped crying. She looked up, her face a pale, tear-stained mask. It was worse. It was so much worse. It was not just Silas. It was the law. "So," she said, her voice dead. "That is it. $100. She stood up, her legs shaking. But she stood. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I am done running," she said, her voice raw. "I will not drag you down. I will not be the reason they put a rope around your neck." She walked to the door. "If you do not want me, Boone, I understand. If I am too much trouble, just say so. Tell me to go. I will walk out that door, and I will not look back. Or you can take me to town. You can collect the $100. It is yours. You earned it. You fed me. You saved me. You should get the reward." He stared at her. He saw a woman offering him her life, offering him a reward to be rid of her. He did not move for a long time. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of the thaw outside. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low, so raw. It was not a voice at all. It was a wound, opening. "I want you," he said. She flinched. "I want you so much," he whispered, and he took a step toward her, his face a mask of agony. "It makes me hate myself." Lila's breath hitched. "I hate it," he said, his voice gaining a broken, angry strength. "I hate that I need your sound in this cabin. I hate that I rode back, worried, like some fool. I hate that I see a man's name on a poster and I want to kill him, just for looking for you. I hate what you make me. I am a man who wants to be left alone, and I do not want to be left alone. Not anymore. And it is your fault." She was crying again, but not for fear. He was not confessing his love. He was confessing his weakness. He was confessing that she, Lillian Hayes. Lila May, a ruined woman, had broken through his walls. He was in front of her now. He did not touch her. I hate myself, he repeated. Because if they come, I will not let you go. If they come, I will kill them, and I will be the man I was in Yuma, and it will be because of you. She reached out and touched his hand, the one he had hurt on the wall. The knuckles were still bruised. Then we are two hateful people, she whispered. He pulled her in. It was not a kiss. It was an embrace. He buried his face in her hair, his arms wrapped around her so tight she could barely breathe. And he just held on. He held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that was melting away. She held him back, her small hands fisted in his shirt, and they stood in the middle of the small, Spartan cabin. Two outcasts, two killers, two people with nowhere to go, clinging to each other. They held each other for hours. When they finally broke apart, the light in the cabin had changed. The fear was still there, but it was no longer between them. It was a shared burden. He will come back, Boone said. It was a fact. And the posters will be put up again, she said. So we leave. Run? No, not running. Leaving. We sell the stock I can sell. We pack what we can carry. We go west, farther west, where the land is new. Oregon. A man can get lost in Oregon. A man and a woman. They can get a new name. Lila looked around the cabin. It had been her prison and her sanctuary. Leave this? It is just wood, Boone said. It is just a place. I came here to vanish. I can vanish somewhere else. When? When the snow melts from the high passes. 2 weeks, 3. He looked her in the eyes. Can you be ready in 3 weeks? She nodded, a slow, determined smile. I can. The dynamic shifted. It was no longer about survival. It was about escape. He went to his lockbox, a small metal thing he kept under his bunk. He took out a small pistol. It was a Derringer, small, with 2 barrels, meant for a gambler's pocket. You know the rifle? He said. That is for them. He gestured to the world outside. This, he said, placing the heavy little gun in her palm. This is for him. He meant Abe Ryder. He meant Silas. He meant any man who got close. It is not for scaring. Lila, it is for killing. You put it to a man's chest, and you pull the trigger. Both, one after the other. You do not stop. You do not talk. You just finish it. He showed her how to hide it in a small leather holster he made, one that tied to her thigh, beneath her skirts. If anyone comes for you, he said, his voice flat, his eyes cold and dark. They will have to go through me, but if they are lucky, if they get past me, you make them pay for it. That night, they did not eat. The fire burned low, casting warm, red shadows on the log walls. They had a plan. They had a future, even if it was a stolen one. They sat on the bearskin rug, the tension of the day, the fear, and the confession, all culminating in a different kind of need. He touched her, his hand slow, almost reverent. He was not taking, he was memorizing. He traced the line of her jaw, his rough thumb brushing her lips. They made love slowly, wordlessly, in front of the fire. It was not the desperate crash of the first time, nor the tender exploration of the second. This was a promise. It was a vow. It was 2 people sealing a bargain in the only way they knew how. And as he was buried deep inside her, his body shielding her from the dark, he looked down at her face, her eyes closed, her lips parted, and for the first time, he spoke her name. Lila, he whispered. Just her name. And it was enough. They did not have 3 weeks. They did not have 2. They had 6 days. The thaw had turned the world to mud. Boone was on the roof, replacing shingles torn loose by the winter storms. When he saw them, 3 riders, coming from the east, not on the trail, but picking their way through the rocky, high ground, keeping to the line of sparse pines. They were not ranchers. They were not law. They were hunters. He slid from the roof, his movements fast and low. He dropped the 10 feet to the ground, landing in the mud with a soft thud. He ran to the cabin door, bursting inside. Lila was by the fire, mending one of his shirts. She looked up, her eyes wide with a question that died on her lips. His face was not just hard. It was a death mask. "They are here," he said. His voice was a flat, dead calm. He grabbed his rifle from the pegs. He checked the load. He pulled the pistol from his belt and handed it to her. "Go to the root cellar, now! Boone, now! Lila!" he roared. He did not look at her. He was already moving to the window, peering through the small crack by the frame. The root cellar was a dark, cold hole dug into the earth beneath the cabin floor, accessed by a thick trap door hidden under the bearskin rug. It smelled of dirt and potatoes. Lila scrambled down the short ladder, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She took the small pistol with her. Boone threw the rug back over the door, plunging her into a near-total, suffocating darkness. She heard his boots on the floorboards above her. She heard him bar the cabin door. She heard the horses outside, the jingle of harnesses, the splash of mud. "Kerrigan," a voice called. It was the reedy, thin voice she had heard in the barn. Abe Ryder. "We know you are in there, and we know who you are in there with." Lila put her hand over her mouth. Her knuckles pressed so hard against her teeth she tasted blood. She heard Boone's voice, a low rumble through the floorboards. "This is my land. Ride off it. Now, we do not want you, Mr. Kerrigan," Abe Ryder called, his voice a mockery of politeness. "We are not here for a half-breed horse thief. We are here for the girl. Silas wants her. Send her out, and we will just leave you be." Lila heard Boone laugh. It was not a sound of humor. It was a cold, sharp, and terrible sound. "Last chance," Boone said. There was a moment of silence, then Abe Ryder's voice, no longer polite. "Get him. I want the girl alive. Him. I do not care." The world exploded. A gunshot, deafening, from inside the cabin. Boone had fired through the window. A man screamed. A high, thin sound. Then, return fire. 2, 3, 4 shots thudded into the thick log walls. Glass shattered. Lila huddled in the dark, her eyes screwed shut, the pistol heavy and useless in her shaking hand. She heard a crash. They were at the door, using a log, a ram. The wood splintered. The bar cracked. The door burst open. She heard the scramble of boots. A yell. "He is in the corner!" Another shot. From Boone's rifle. So close, it shook the floor. A man grunted. "Damn it, he got me." "Get him, you fool!" Abe yelled. She heard a struggle, a crash, as if the table had been thrown. Grunts, and the sick, wet sound of a fist hitting flesh. Over and over. "Got him! Got the savage bastard!" She heard Boone's rifle clatter to the floor, skidding across the boards. "Where is she? You son of a bitch!" Abe Ryder's voice, panting, furious. She heard another thud. Boone. He had grunted in pain. "Check the loft. Check the bunk. Find her." "He is tied?" "He is tied." Lila's blood went cold. They had him. They had tied him. "You are a tough one, Kerrigan," Abe panted. "I will give you that, but you are stupid. Hiding a murderer. Hiding Silas's property." Another dull, wet thud. Boone did not make a sound. "Where is she?" Lila pressed her hands over her ears. She could not. "He ain't talking. Abe." This was a new voice. Rougher, deeper. "Let's just burn the cabin. She comes out, or she burns. Either way, we find her." "No," Abe snapped. "Silas wants her unmarked. He will not talk. Fine, let him watch." Lila heard the heavy scrape of the chair. "Bring him here. Make him face the door. He can watch us ride off with her. After we say hello." Abe's voice was suddenly right above her, just on the other side of the rug. "Come on, Lillian. I know you are in here. The cellar? Under the bed? Come on out. You make us come get you. My friend here, he is not gentle. He is the one you cut. He is real eager to see you." A man laughed. "I am. Abe, I surely am." Another thud. This time, Boone made a noise, a low, guttural groan of agony. He was doing it to make Boone talk. He was beating him, knowing she could hear. Lila May looked at the pistol in her hand. She could shoot herself. Quick, 2 barrels. He had said how, but they would not stop beating Boone. They would find her, dead, and they would probably kill him anyway. For the trouble. She could hear Boone's breathing. It was ragged, a wet, rattling sound. He was drowning in his own blood, and they were going to keep hitting him until she came out. She had been a coward her whole life. She had run from her husband. She had run from Silas. She had run from this cabin, only to be stopped by his return. She was done running. She put the derringer in the pocket of her skirt. She stood, her legs shaking, and pushed open the trap door. The light was blinding. The cabin was a wreck. The table was overturned. Chairs smashed. Boone was tied to the one remaining chair, in the middle of the room. His head was bowed. His face was a ruin, swollen and purple, a mask of blood. One eye was closed, the other, a slit of pure, animalistic hatred, was open. Abe Ryder was standing over him, his fist drawn back. A second man, a huge, bearded man with a dirty bandage on his arm, was holding a pistol. A third man, the one who had screamed, was lying by the door, his leg a bloody mess. But he was alive, and he had a rifle trained on Boone. They all froze, turning to her as she emerged from the floor. A ghost in a simple dress, her hair unbound, her face white. Abe Ryder's ruined. Bloody fist stopped. His mouth dropped open. Then he smiled. It was the worst thing she had ever seen. Well, Abe said, wiping his bloody hand on his trousers. The little mouse comes out to play. Look at that. Boys, right under our feet. The bearded man grinned, his gun steady. Hello, Lillian. We missed you. Boone tried to surge, a deep roar in his chest. The chair held, the ropes bit deep. Lila, he gurgled, blood on his lips. No. Shut up, savage, Abe snapped, and he backhanded Boone across his ruined face. Stop, Lila screamed. The word tore from her throat, raw and strong. Stop it. Do not touch him. Abe turned to her, his smile gone. Oh, you are giving orders now? You are in no place to give orders. Lillian, you are property. He walked to her. She did not back away. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting in. You are going to come with us. You are going to be quiet, and you are going to make Silas very, very happy. Untie him. What? The bearded man said. Abe, we cannot just leave him. We are not, Abe said. Untie him. He sees us take her. Then we put a bullet in his half-breed head, a little treat. For me. The man by the door grunted, scrambling to his feet, his leg dragging. I will do it. You stay there, Abe ordered. Jeb, untie the bastard. The bearded man, Jeb, holstered his pistol, his eyes still on Lila, and pulled a knife. He walked behind Boone's chair. You watch this, Lillian, Abe said, pulling her close, his sour breath on her face. You watch what happens to men who play hero. Jeb cut the ropes on Boone's wrists. It happened so fast, Lila could not even process it. The moment his hands were free, Boone did not stand. He exploded. He did not go for Abe. He went for Jeb, the man behind him. He surged backward, his 14-stone weight, the chair, all of it, slamming into the bearded man. Jeb roared, surprised, stumbling back. Boone was on his feet, the chair still tied to his back, a broken wooden shackle. He grabbed the overturned table, a heavy slab of pine, and lifted it, roaring, a sound of pure, primal rage. He threw it. The table spun, catching the man by the door in the chest. The man fired, his rifle shot going wild, into the ceiling. Abe threw Lila to the floor, drawing his pistol. Kill him! Kill him! Jeb recovered, drew his knife and charged, roaring. Boone, unarmed, his hands still raw, met him. He caught the man's knife hand, and the sound of their bodies colliding shook the cabin. Lila scrambled on the floor. The cabin was a chaos of shouts, grunts, and thudding bodies. Abe was aiming. He was aiming his pistol, not at Boone, but at her. No, she whispered. She saw the pitchfork. It was not in the cabin. It was in the barn. The man with the bad leg was trying to reload his rifle. Boone and Jeb were on the floor, a tangle of limbs, fighting for the knife. Abe pointed the gun at her. "Stay down, bitch!" He was going to shoot Boone in the back. Lila looked for a weapon. The cabin was wrecked, but by the wall, where they had hit the door, a long, splintered beam, a piece of the door jamb. Torn loose, Boone roared. A sound of agony. Jeb had the knife. He had stabbed Boone in the side, high on the ribs. Boone bellowed and slammed the man's head against the packed earth floor. Once, twice, there was a wet, cracking sound. Jeb went limp. Boone staggered to his feet, the knife handle sticking out of his side. He was bleeding. He was bleeding badly. The man with the bad leg had his rifle up. He fired. The shot was wild. Boone was moving. It took a chunk out of the log wall. Boone was unarmed. The man was reloading. Abe was pointing his gun. Boone did the only thing he could. He charged Abe. He went low, like a bull, his head down. Abe fired. The shot was deafening, the cabin filling with smoke. The bullet grazed Boone's shoulder. A hot slice of pain. Boone did not stop. He hit Abe in the stomach. The two men crashed through the broken door, onto the muddy porch. Lila ran. She did not run to the cellar. She ran past the man with the bad leg, who was fumbling with cartridges. She ran to the wall. She grabbed the broken beam. It was heavy, splintered, a yard long. The man turned, his rifle finally loaded. He saw her. He raised the gun. Lila screamed, a high, thin sound, and she swung the beam like a club. All her weight, all her terror, all her rage. She hit the rifle, not the man. The wood of the stock splintered. The gun flew from his hands. He stared at her, his mouth open, stupid with shock. She swung again, a low, horizontal swing. She hit him in his good leg. She heard a snap. He screamed and went down. She dropped the beam. She did not look at him. She ran to the door. Boone and Abe were on the porch, in the mud. Abe had lost his pistol. They were trading blows, clumsy, desperate, bloody. Boone was weaker, the knife wound in his side pumping blood. Abe was a street fighter. He kneed Boone in the groin. Boone gasped, falling back. Abe saw her. "Lily!" he spat, blood in his teeth. "You whore! You are dead!" He lunged for her. "Boone!" she screamed. Boone was on his knees. He looked up, his one good eye finding hers. He saw the terror. He saw Abe charging her. Boone reached to his side. He did not touch his wound. He grabbed the handle of the knife Jeb had stuck in him. He roared and pulled it out. A gush of hot, dark blood followed. Abe was almost to Lila. Boone threw the knife, an underhand, clumsy, desperate throw. It was not a good throw. It was not a clean throw. It tumbled, end over end. It hit Abe in the back. The point, by sheer dumb luck, caught in his neck. Abe stopped. He choked. He looked surprised. He reached back, his fingers touching the handle. He gurgled, a sound like a drowning man. He turned, his eyes wide, looking at Lila. He took one step and fell, face first, into the mud. The silence was absolute. There was only the sound of the drip, drip, drip of the thaw. Lila stood on the porch, her dress spattered with mud. The man in the cabin with the broken legs was groaning. Jeb was dead. Abe was dead. Boone was on his hands and knees in the mud, trying to push himself up. He was a fountain of blood. "Boone," she whispered. She ran to him. He fell as she reached him. She caught him, staggering under his weight. "Inside," he GT gasped, his blood hot on her hands, on her dress. The other one." She dragged him. He was a dead weight. She hauled him, his boots dragging in the mud. Up the one step, into the cabin. The man with the broken legs was trying to crawl to his rifle. Lila let Boone slump against the wall. She walked, her steps measured, cold, precise. She walked to the man. She picked up the heavy beam. He looked up at her, his face white with pain and terror. "Please," he whimpered. "Please, lady, I got a family." "So do I," Lila said, and she swung the beam, hard at his head. The sound was a wet, heavy thunk. He did not make a noise. She stood, panting, the beam heavy in her hand. She let it fall. She ran to Boone. He was slumped against the wall, his eyes closed, his face the color of ash. The knife wound in his side was a gaping, terrible mouth, pulsing blood. "No," she said. "No, you do not die." She ripped her skirt, the hem, tearing a long strip. She grabbed the whiskey flask from the shelf. She knelt beside him. "Boone, Boone, look at me." His eye fluttered open. "Lila," he breathed. "This will hurt," she said. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was not. She poured the whiskey, a huge amount, directly into the wound. Boone's body arched off the floor. A sound was torn from his throat, a raw, inhuman scream, but he did not pass out. She pressed the wadded cloth, the strip of her dress, into the wound. Hard. She pushed with all her weight. He cried out again. "I am sorry. I am sorry." She wept, the tears finally coming, hot and fast, dripping onto his bloody shirt. "I am so sorry. This is my fault. All of it." She tended his wounds, the graze on his shoulder, the cuts on his face, but mostly the gaping hole in his side. She bound him, tight, with every strip of cloth she could find, until she was tearing up the bed sheets. He was going to die. He had lost too much blood. He was pale, his skin cold and clammy. She sat on the floor, in the wreck of their cabin, surrounded by dead men, and held his head in her lap. She stroked his hair, his matted, bloody hair. "I am so sorry," she sobbed. He lay there for a long time, his breathing shallow. She thought he was gone. Then his hand, his one good hand, came up and found hers. His grip was weak, a ghost of his strength. I would rather die here," she whispered, her tears falling on his face. "I would rather die right here with you than go back. I would rather be dead than be what I was." He looked up at her, his one good eye finding hers in the gloom. He was not a man who spoke. He was a man who did. His lips moved. It was a dry, rasping sound. She had to lean close to hear him. "Then," he whispered, his voice a thread, "we do not die here." They buried the bodies at night. It was Lila who did the digging. Boone was too weak. He sat, propped against a tree, his rifle across his lap, and kept watch, though he could barely lift his head. Lila dug. She had never worked so hard. The ground was cold, rocky, and stubborn. She dug one wide, deep grave, far from the cabin, near the canyon rim. It took her hours. Her hands were raw, bleeding, her back a single, burning ache. She dragged them, one by one, Abe, Jeb, the other man. She did not feel anything. She did not feel fear, or pity, or remorse. She felt only a cold, hard exhaustion. She rolled them in, and she covered them. When she was done, she stood over the mound of raw earth, leaning on the shovel, her breath pluming in the cold night air. Boone was weak. He was weaker than she had ever seen him. She had to half carry him back to the cabin. She cleaned him as she had cleaned herself, washing the blood of other men from their skin. She laid him in the bunk. He had a fever. He was shivering, his teeth chattering, despite the blankets she piled on him. She sat by the bunk, in the chair, not the one he had been tied to. She had broken that one, for firewood. She sat, her back straight, his rifle in her lap. The Derringer was still in her pocket. She kept watch. She did not sleep. She was no longer the woman who hid. She was the woman who waited, the woman who swung, the woman who buried. She listened to the wolves howl, and for the first time, she was not afraid of them. She was afraid of what they represented. Word might spread. Abe Ryder had a mouth. He might have told someone in Two Forks. In a saloon, where he was going. Going to the half-breed's place. Get the girl. They could not stay. They could not wait for the passes to clear. They could not wait for Boone to heal. They had to leave. They had to leave now. He was sick for 2 days. He was in and out of consciousness. Lila fed him water, thin broth. She cleaned his wound. It was red, angry, but it was not rotting. He was strong. His land, his blood, it was strong. On the third morning, he woke. The fever was broken. He looked at her, his eye clear. She was sitting in the chair, the rifle across her lap, asleep. Her head had nodded forward. He watched her for a long time, the woman who had come, broken, the woman who had saved him. "Lila," he said. Her head snapped up, her hand instantly on the rifle. Her eyes were wide, wild, for a second. Then she saw him. "You are awake," she breathed. "We have to go," he said, his voice a croak. "You cannot ride." "I will ride," he said. Pack what you can. Food, ammunition, the blankets." He used the wall to pull himself to his feet. He swayed, his face white. A low grunt of pain forced from his lips. He put his hand on his side. Lila was at his side. "Boone, you will kill yourself." "They will kill us if we stay." He was steady. He was standing. "Pack, now." While she packed, he moved. He was slow, agonizingly slow. He took a sack and put in his tools, his knife sharpener, his axe head, his tinder box. When it was all done, the cabin was bare. The horses were saddled, the mule packed. It was evening. They would leave under the cover of dark. Boone stood in the middle of the room. He looked around at the place that had been his fortress. It was a ruin. It was stained with blood and memory. He drew his knife. He walked to the wall, by the fireplace, the place he had smashed his fist. He began to carve, slowly, his hands shaking from weakness. He carved into the pine, 4 letters. Lila. He stepped back, his breath coming hard. Lila looked at the wall, her name, carved into his home. She walked to him. She did not say a word. She took the knife from his weak, trembling hand, and just beside it, her own hand steady, she carved his Boone. They stood for a moment, looking at the wall. Lila, Boone, a testament, a scar. Boone turned. He did not look back. He took his rifle, and, leaning on her for support, he walked out of the cabin and left the key in the door. They did not ride west. They crawled. Boone was a dead weight for the first week. He rode Flint, slumped in the saddle, his good hand gripping the horn. The other pressed to the wound in his side, which wept blood through the bandages. Lila led the horse, pulling the pack mule, walking through the mud and the half-melted snow. They looked like ghosts, haunted and hunted. 2 small figures in a vast, indifferent landscape. They made it to a trading post on the Green River, a collection of shacks and a fortified store that smelled of wet fur and whiskey. Boone could not go in. He was a half-breed, and he was bleeding. A man like that, in a place like this, invited questions or violence. He sat on his horse, a silent, gaunt figure, his rifle across his lap, and waited. Lila went in alone. She was not Lillian Hayes, the murderer. She was not Lila May, the survivor. She became Lila Parsons. She was a widow, she told the trader, her voice flat and cold. Her husband had died of the lung fever on the trail, and she had buried him. She was going west, to Oregon, to meet her brother. She was a woman alone, and she needed a wagon. The lie was good. It was believable. Her face, pale and hard, was the face of a widow. The trader looked at her, at the fine bones in her face, and at the raw, calloused, scarred hands that clutched her small coin purse. He saw a woman who had seen hell, and he did not ask questions. She traded the pack mule and her own saddle horse. She traded the last of the coins she had pulled from Abe Ryder's dead pocket. She traded everything except Flint. She would not trade Boone's horse. In return, she got a broken-down wagon, its canvas cover patched and torn. She got a single, sway-backed ox, old and mean, but strong. She got 2 sacks of flour, a side of bacon, salt, and cartridges. They left the trading post, a new, strange-looking family. Boone, still too weak to sit up, lay in the back of the wagon, his face turned to the canvas, his rifle beside him. Lila sat on the hard wooden seat, the reins in her hands, and pointed the ox west. The journey was a slow, grinding misery. Boone was slow to heal. The wagon jolted, and every rut in the trail, every rock, was a fresh torment. He would lay in the back, his eyes shut, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. He had a fever, and it came and go, leaving him drenched in sweat and shaking. Lila would stop the wagon, wash him with cold water from the creek, and force broth, or whiskey, between his lips. She became hard. She learned to drive the ox, to grease the wheels with bacon fat, to set snares for rabbits, which she would skin and cook, her stomach no longer turning. She learned to trade at the small, dusty forts they passed. She used her new name, Lila Parsons. And her story was always the same. Her brother was in Oregon. Her husband was dead. She was alone. Men looked at her. They saw a woman, alone, and their eyes were hungry. But then they would see the rifle, always within her reach, or, on his good days, they would see Boone sitting up in the wagon, a dark, silent man with the eyes of a wolf, cleaning his pistol. They would see the half-breed and the widow, and the hunger in their eyes would turn to fear, or confusion, and they would leave her be. They crossed into Utah. The land was red, a different kind of desolation, beautiful and deadly. The sun was a hammer, and the wagon wheel, old and dry, finally split. It cracked, a sound like a pistol shot, and the wagon lurched. Leaning to one side, they were stranded, miles from any water, with only a day or two of food. Boone, his strength slowly returning, his wound now a puckered, angry scar, stood by the wagon, his face a mask of grim frustration. He could fight men. He could not fight this. "I will take Flint," he said, his voice a rasp. "I will ride for something." "You will not," Lila said. She was not arguing. She was stating a fact. "You are not strong enough, and I am not waiting here to die." They were a day, walking, from the last stream. They would not make it. They waited. For 2 days, they sat in the meager shade of the wagon, the world silent, hot, and empty. On the third morning, a man found them. He was not a hunter. He was not a soldier. He was a farmer. He rode up on a mule, his face lined with sun and kindness, his beard a plain, brown-gray. He carried a rifle, but it was resting easy in his arms. He stopped, his eyes taking in the broken wagon, the spent ox, the pale woman, and the dark, watchful man who stood by her, his hand on his own rifle. "You look to be in some trouble. Friends," the man said, his voice calm. "Our wheel," Lila said, her throat dry. The man nodded. "I am Samuel Miller. My farm is a half-day's ride. In the valley, my boys, they can help." He looked at Boone, a long, quiet look. He saw the dark skin, the long hair. He saw the scar. He saw the man's hand resting near his gun. He did not flinch. He just nodded, as if in greeting. "My wife, Esther. She makes a fine stew." It took the rest of the day. Samuel Miller rode back and returned hours later with his 2 sons, Caleb and Joshua, strapping boys of 18 and 20, who looked at Boone with a mixture of awe and fear. They brought a spare wheel. They were strong and kind, and they did not ask the questions that haunted the air. They brought them to the Miller farm. It was not a ranch. It was not a fortress. It was a home. It was a small, neat cabin, but it had a porch with chairs. There were chickens in the yard. There was a field, plowed in neat, careful rows. Esther Miller came out. She was a broad woman, her hair in a tight bun, flour on her apron, her face the kindest face Lila had ever seen. She took one look at Lila, pale and shaking with relief, and at Boone, dark and wounded and defensive, and she opened her arms. "Praise God," she said. "You are here. You are safe. Come in. The food is hot." Lila started to cry. She had not cried when she buried the men. She had not cried when the wheel broke. She cried now, standing in a stranger's yard, at the simple offer of a hot meal. They stayed. They had meant to stay a night, a day. They stayed for weeks. "You will stay," Esther had said, her voice leaving no room for argument, "until this man," she had pointed at Boone, "is truly healed, and until this woman," She had pointed at Lila. Has some meat back on her bones. It was the first true peace they had ever known. The Millers were good people, God-fearing, but not judgmental. They asked no questions. They did not ask why Boone was half Comanche. They did not ask what had happened to Lila's first husband. They simply saw two souls who needed rest. Boone, as his strength returned fully, grew restless. He could not accept charity, so he began to work. He repaid them the only way he knew. He took Caleb and Joshua, the Miller boys, out. He sat on the porch, his side still tender, but his arms strong. He taught them. You shoot like farmers, he told them, his voice flat. They had been wary of him, this silent, scarred man. But they listened. He taught them how to shoot, not like farmers, but like warriors. He taught them how to breathe, how to wait, how to feel the trigger, not pull it. He taught them how to clean a rifle until it shined, how to track a deer, how to read the land. The boys, who had only known their father's gentle ways, began to look at Boone with a deep, quiet reverence. Lila sat with Esther and the daughter, Ruth, a quiet girl of 16. She found a strange, forgotten comfort in the rhythms of a woman's life. She helped with the canning, the mending, the baking, the skills she had learned in her fine St. Louis home. The ones she thought were useless came back. She taught Ruth how to sew fine stitches, how to embroider a small, blue flower on a collar. My, Esther had said, marveling at the tiny, perfect stitches. You have fine hands, child. Lila looked at her hands. They were no longer fine. They were red, scarred, calloused. The hands of a woman who had buried men and driven an ox. No, Lila had said, a small smile on her face. But they are strong. It was Esther who knew first. It was the sickness, a quiet, insistent nausea every morning. Lila would slip out of the small room they had given her hand over her mouth, and be sick by the woodpile. She thought it was the water, or the rich food. One afternoon, they were shelling peas on the porch, the air warm and smelling of pine. When is the child due? Lila? Esther asked, her voice soft, her eyes on the peas in her lap. Lila froze, the pod in her hand split, the small green peas scattering. I am not. The lie died. She had not bled. Not since the blizzard. Not since the first night, in the bunk, with Boone. She had been so consumed with running, with healing, with surviving. She had not counted. She had not dared to think. She looked at Esther, her eyes wide with a new, fresh, and terrible panic. Oh, God, she whispered. Esther, what am I? What will I do? Esther put down her bowl and took Lila's rough hands in her own. You will do what women have always done. Child, she said, her voice a deep, calm river. You will love it, and you will raise it. The Lord provides. Lila did not feel like the Lord had provided. She felt like he had played a terrible, cruel joke. She was a wanted woman, a murderer, living with an outcast, a killer. They had no home. They had no money. They had nothing. And now, a baby. She hid it. She did not tell Boone. How could she? He was just now healing. He was just now learning to smile. Small, rare grins he shared with the Miller boys. How could she tell him that their fragile, stolen peace was about to be shattered by a new, impossible responsibility? A baby was a mouth to feed. It was a weakness. It was a small, crying thing that would get them caught. He found out. He was a man who lived by watching. He had been watching her since the moment he'd found her. A pile of rags by his fence. He saw the sickness she tried to hide. He saw the way she pressed her hand to her stomach when she thought no one was looking. He saw the new, strange, haunted look in her eyes, a fear that had nothing to do with Abe Ryder. He confronted her by the creek. She was washing, her back to him, her sleeves rolled up. Lila, he said. His voice was quiet. She stiffened. Boone, you startled me. Are you sick? He asked. I am fine, she said, her voice too bright, as she scrubbed a shirt with a furious, sudden energy. You are not fine, he said. He walked around, standing in front of her, blocking her path. You have been sick every morning. Your face, it is different. She stopped scrubbing. The water dripped from her red hands. "Boone, please, look at me." She looked up at him. Her eyes were defiant, and they were filled with the same terror he had seen in the cellar. He knew. His own face went pale. He, who had faced 3 armed men, who had taken a knife in his side, looked, for a moment, as if she had struck him. He did not yell. He did not curse. He turned away from her, walked 3 steps to a willow tree, and put his hand on it to steady himself. He bent over, as if he might be sick himself. Then he fell to his knees. He did not fall in prayer. He fell in a complete, sudden collapse. He put his head in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking. "No," he whispered, the sound a ragged tear in the quiet air. "I cannot." Lila ran to him, kneeling in the damp earth in front of him. "Boone, Boone, look at me." "I cannot," he said, his voice muffled by his hands. "Not this, not me." He looked up, and his face was a mask of such raw agony. It stole her breath. "Lila, I am a killer. I am a savage. My blood, it is not clean." "Do not," she said, her voice sharp. I am not a father," he choked out, the words tearing from him. "A father is good. A father is a decent man. I am nothing. I am a man who has lived in a cage. I have blood on my hands. I cannot make something good. I will ruin it." Lila took his face in her hands that had held a pistol, that had buried men, that had healed him. She held his face, his scarred, beautiful face, and she made him look at her. "You are not a killer," she said, her voice a steel blade. "You are a survivor. You are the man who sat outside my door because I was afraid of the dark. You are the man who held me when I was cold. You are the man who pulled a knife from his own body to save me. You are the man who bled for me." She pressed her forehead against his. "I have known good men. Boone, my husband, was a good man. He was clean, and he was polite, and he sold me like cattle. Silas is a good man. He is rich, and he is respected, and he is a monster. I am tired of good men." Her voice broke, but she did not weep. "You," she whispered, "are the only man I have ever truly known, and you are the only man on this earth I trust. You are the only one I trust to protect this child. You are the only man I trust with us. You are good." He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers, and for the first time, the self-loathing, the hate he had carried since Yuma, it began to crack. They were married by the creek, beneath the cottonwood trees. Samuel Miller, a practical man who was also a lay preacher, had simply nodded when they told him. "Well," he had said, "the good book says to be fruitful. It also says to be married." Lila wore a simple blue dress that Esther and Ruth had stayed up all night to help her make. Boone wore a clean shirt, his hair tied back, his face clean-shaven. He looked civilized, but his eyes, they were still wild, and they never left her. Samuel Miller read from his Bible. Esther and Ruth wept. Caleb and Joshua stood beside Boone, their faces scrubbed, trying to look as hard and solemn as the man they so admired. They did not have rings. Boone had carved them, 2 simple, pale bands from a fallen cottonwood branch. He had smoothed them with saddle oil. He took her hand, her scarred, strong hand. "With this," he said, his voice a low rumble, I am yours." She slid the matching ring on his finger. "And I am yours." They left. A week later. They could not stay. Oregon was waiting. The Millers gave them a new, sturdy wagon, 2 good oxen, and enough supplies to see them to the next territory. "Go with God," Samuel said, his hand on Boone's shoulder. They found their valley, high in the Oregon mountains, near a river that ran fast and clean, with pines that whispered in the wind. It was a place to be lost. A good place. They built their cabin. Boone worked with a feverish, focused energy. He was not building a fortress. This time, he was building a home. It was smaller, tighter, but he built a porch. Lila had loved the miller's porch. So he built her one. The baby came with the first snows. The passes were already closed. They were alone. It was not a good birth. It was long, and it was hard. Lila was in labor for 2 days. She was a wild thing, her body a battlefield. Boone was terrified. He had faced men with guns. He had faced death. This was worse. This was a thing he could not fight. He could only watch as the woman who was his entire world was torn apart. She would scream, and he would grip her hand. She would curse, and he would wipe her face. "I cannot!" she shrieked, her voice gone. Her body arched in a final, impossible agony. "I cannot! Boone! I am dying!" "No!" he roared, his own voice breaking, tears streaming down his face. The first tears he had shed since his mother had died. "You are not! You do not leave me! Lila, you do not leave me here! Hold on!" He held her, his arms under her, holding her up, and she gave one last, terrible, ragged push. And then, silence. A small, wet, terrible silence. "Lila?" he whispered, his heart stopping. And in that silence, a new sound, a gasp, and then a thin, reedy, furious wail. The baby. It was alive. It was crying. Boone staggered back, his hand over his mouth. He hit the log wall, then slid down it, his legs giving out. He sat on the floor, put his head on his knees, and he sobbed. He wept like a child. He wept for Yuma, for the blood, for the death, for Abe, for the ranch, and for this small, perfect, screaming life. Lila was pale, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes half closed, but she was smiling. "Boone," she whispered. "A boy. He is beautiful." He crawled over, on his hands and knees, still weeping, unable to stop. He looked at the small, red, furious creature in her arms. His son. What do we name him?" he asked, his voice thick. Lila looked at the baby, and then at Boone, and then at the window, where the snow was falling, covering their new home, making them safe, making them new. "River," she whispered. "We will call him River, for the thing that always moves forward, the thing that never looks back." The winter was hard, but the cabin was warm. It was small, but it was full. Months passed. The snow melted. Spring came to their valley. The story ends with the spring. Lila is standing on the porch, the one he built for her. She is not the haunted, broken thing he found. She is strong, her body filled out, her hair tied back, her hands on her hips. She is watching her family. Boone is standing by the new corral. He is not the hermit, the killer, the outcast. He is holding their son. River is 6 months old, a fat, healthy baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's watchful eyes. He is tucked in the crook of Boone's arm, his head resting on Boone's solid chest. Boone is whispering to him, his voice a low, gentle rumble that Lila can feel, more than hear, from the porch. No one. He is whispering, his lips near the baby's ear. "No one takes anything from us. This time. This is ours. This land. This, us. I will not let them." Lila smiles. She has her life. She has her child. She has this huge, dangerous, gentle man. She walks across the porch, her boots quiet on the new-cut boards, and stands beside him. She leans her head against his shoulder. He is still a mountain, a solid, warm wall of strength. He is still, after all this time, an overwhelming force. "You are still too big," she whispers, her voice full of a warm, teasing love, her hand coming up to rest on his arm. Boone looks down, first at the child in his arms, then at the woman who is his life. A slow grin spreads across his weathered face, a rare, beautiful thing that lights his dark eyes. He pulls her in, his arm circling her waist, pulling her and the child into one solid, unbreakable circle. "Then," he says, his voice a low, happy rumble, "hold on tighter. Thank you for listening to this story. I have been telling tales for 100 years, and this is one that needed to be told. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I always love to hear how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed our time together, please consider subscribing to From Wild West. We have a lot more stories to tell. From a time when the land was hard, but love was harder. Please share your thoughts. What part of Lila and Boone's journey stayed with you? Your words are a comfort.